Hey guys, Budcat7 here. Okay, it is Monday, August 12th, 2019, and I want to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Welcome to all my new subscribers. Thank you very much for subbing, and I hope I can make it worth your time. Please do hit the like button if you do like the videos, guys. Really, it helps support the channel, and I really appreciate it. Okay, well, we're going to talk about a very entertaining, good article that I came across. And the reason why I'm doing this, and people who are older subs would know, I covered material on the large hominids. And by the way, Phil from the Ancient Alternative View just produced a video on the giants that was excellent. So please do watch the video there. It gives a sort of comprehensive look at the giants with some other interesting things that I've never seen before. So please do look at Phil's video, and it's very good. Okay, so, and thank you, Phil, for the shout out, by the way. All right, so look, I covered on my channel Lovelock Cave, and as the current story about it is, through whether it's mainstream or alternative, especially in the religious view of it, with the Nephilim and all, these, and the reason why it's easy for them to jump that way is because of things like this. Here's an article at academia.org, which I belong to, so I get a lot of stuff from here. So this is monstrous appetites, giants, cannibalism, and insatiable eating in Enochic literature. So this is all sort of references to the Bible where these giants were, cannibals and drinking blood and all this kind of stuff. And I don't care. And, here's where you're going to hear the kind of things on my channel that you're not going to hear anywhere else. This is my own hypothesis. Theories based on hardcore research, which is often mainstream research. Now, I'm not reading alternative stuff or, look, I can read a lot of that stuff and, often we do articles of people who do that stuff, but my own take on it has nothing to do with that, so it's a sort of an odd man out look at these things, and you're only going to hear it on this channel and nowhere else. And I don't care what it says in the Bible here or whatever. These are just more propaganda demonizing the enemy, as I went over on my research into Lovelock Cave. Okay. This is a boogeyman tale, demonizing the enemy, a baby tale, okay? And for paranoid people who are afraid of the unknown, and especially people who are larger size, okay? Think about it, this is easy to understand from a sociological point of view if you've studied any sociology. It's demonizing the enemy is like, sociology 101. You have this enemy figure that, it keeps social cohesion among the people. So these tales, these baby tales, these boogeyman tales about them coming in the night and eating your children. I mean, we've heard these tales over and over again, and whether it's the witch in the woods with the gingerbread house or whatever it is, there's reasons for that too, okay? About how many of these people from maybe the nature people of old knew all about medicines and herbs and all this kind of stuff, and they lived often alone in the woods, and there was a systematic extermination of those people too, and you can read it in the witch burnings in Europe. I read a book called The Evil Eye, was all about it. I forget the author right now, but I read a lot of books. But this demonization of the enemy made it easier for you to kill them. So this is what this ancient, English fairy tale is also all about. And it wasn't only the people at Lovelock, it was the people at Galena Canyon, as I went over with Frank C. Hibbins' research. It was evidently the peaceful pueblos, it was the alleged peaceful pueblo, because that's what the evidence showed. The type of weaponry that was used to kill those people were of Pueblo design. Okay, and also at the salmon ruins, again, more tales of cannibalistic giants and all this kind of stuff. So it's not unique to the Americas, and just saw from the Bible stories, etc., etc. This is just a repeated theme. Apparently, there was some place back in time, okay, that there was a systematic extermination of these people. It's, not necessarily connected in any way, but, regionally or, specific to it. But because this is what Homo sapien is all about. This is what makes us apex. Okay, even over the Neanderthal, whoever it was, we're the tops. It doesn't matter if you're a giant either, so, or little. We didn't like any of these people who are not like us. Okay, so apparently at some point back in time, worldwide, there was this systematic genocide going on against these people who might have been of this different phenotype, different morphology, possibly a different humanoid species, not even related to Homo sapien, with its own line in the past. The largest ones may be the oldest ones, and all the ones in between, like my hypothesis goes about the North American Indians here, especially the ones across the United States, are some sort of hybrid. Okay, this is the only way these people could send their genes into the future, because the gravity of the planet changed in such a way that all of these large things in the past all died out. Okay, not only were they hunted to extermination by human beings, Homo sapiens, we did that too. But these larger animals could not function as well as we could. It was more designed for the current gravity. But you see, we did better in it. They didn't. So this is how they had to pass it on. So there's these hybrid species all over. And it could be the Beaker people in Europe, and the Adena, and the people from Galena and Snaketown and Mesa Verde, and all of these places, as they say, for the Lovelock people, slightly more robust, or whatever it was. You got to understand that even this ancient tale, this ancient fairy tale in Britain, made it okay for us to kill the giants, okay, and exterminate them all. That's part of our legacy, and unfortunately, part of, us destroying a link to the past that we want to understand now, but we're never going to, probably. Or at least it's going to be difficult to find out. We're trying. So let me read this entertaining article for you. Okay, he's killing giants so justified. I just found that interesting that this guy would even put this forth here, and just up for discussion here, and it's just very interesting. And here's an old postcard or something. Advertisement for Little Giant shoes in late 19th century. Jack the Giant Killer. So it's not Jack and the Beanstalk. Okay, so let me read the article. It's pretty entertaining. It's sort of dark and sarcastic too. Last week we talked about the first literary version of Jack and the Beanstalk, a weird tale from 1734 framed by discussions of Christmas traditions, witches, hobgoblins, and ghosts that hinted at a revolution and overthrow. Get that. Okay, you see that there. And just thinking from a psychological point of view, when things like this are mentioned, you understand the psychology of it all. and why this would happen and why you would have these tales of, killing giants, etc., whether it be in the Bible or Native American, whatever it is. Okay, they're all propaganda tales, all demonizing the enemy. We exterminated the giants, period. That's our legacy. All right, we didn't like them, and we got rid of them. But as I say, they unfortunately integrated and shared their genes in numerous places around the planet with other peoples, and some among the tallest people in the world at a time when average sized people were very small. Okay, which is any time before 1800, since human height hasn't changed since the Stone Age. Okay, we did the research, all mainstream, we know it. All right, I went over this in my videos with the history of height. Okay. And pretty much stated flat out without hinting that before Jack went up the beanstalk, he was involved in some entertaining bedtime fun with his grandmother, an enchantress, fun that eventually allowed him to become the ruler of the entire world. Ahem. Perhaps not surprisingly, Jack and the Beanstalk vanished from the literary world for several decades after this, either because few writers felt capable of following this up with their own version, or because few writers wanted to be associated with that version. But in 1807, a certain B.A.T. published a short version, The History of Mother Twaddle and the Marvelous Achievements of Her Son Jack. The spelling is B.A.T.'s, not mine, which is apparently popular enough to be republished in Pennsylvania 2 years later by William Charles, who charged 25 cents per copy. The book did contain 15 engravings. By short, I mean very short. A surviving copy, which recently sold for $3,000, contained only 16 leaves, but was lavishly illustrated in color. Okay, and I guess that's this book right here. Okay. The illustrations, the size of the book, the language level, and the rhymes all suggest that, unlike its predecessor, The History of Mother Twaddle was meant for children. It starts off simply: Mother Twaddle finds an unexpected sixpence and sends her son Jack off to get a goose. For all the good things I vow and protest, a goose is the nicest and I love it the best. Not perhaps the best poetry, but something that could easily be read to a child. Okay, so you can indoctrinate them into killing giants. Instead of goose, however, Jack ends up buying a bean from a Jew. A slight touch of anti-Semitism, somewhat mitigated by the fact that this is a magic bean. If a bean that leads Jack straight into the home of a giant who quotes a rhyme similar to the one in the earlier story. Fee, fo, fan, I smell the blood of an Englishman. If he be alive or if he be dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread. Okay, so there's your propaganda right there. Okay, making it A-okay to go out and kill giants, just, wholesale, wipe them out, get rid of them. Okay? Is an ancient English fairy tale. Alright? Suggesting that either this author knew the earlier version or that this poem had been firmly attached to the oral version of the story. Jack and a maid in the castle quickly convince the giant to drink some ale, which causes the giant to fall down, allowing Jack to cut off the giant's head. Jack then sends for his mother. They finally have some goose, and Jack realizes that the maid is quite pretty. The parson came soon and made her Jack's wife, and they lived very happy to the end of their life. How exactly everyone convinced the parson to climb the beanstalk is not quite clear, but maybe they were able to pay him a little extra from the giant's treasure. This extremely short version, containing little beyond Jack, the giant, the rhyme, and a happy ending — my quotes are about 1/3 of the entire text, no exaggeration — was one of two to appear that year, the second claiming inaccurately to be the first version of The History of Jack and the Beanstalk. publishers exaggerating since at least 1807, was published by a certain Benjamin Tabart, whose company almost exclusively published children's stories, both the very didactic and boring, and stories with gasp, no moral at all. I know. As a side note, oh shit, sorry about that. Oops. As a side note, that lack of morals, along with some other evidence, has led some scholars to believe that Benjamin Tabart was not, as it happened, actually Benjamin Tabart, but rather Sir Richard Phillips, a known political radical who would not have been the choice of most parents of the era as an instructor for their children, and who therefore would have found it rather difficult to sell children's books under his own name. This was almost certainly why the history of Jack and the Beanstalk was published anonymously, because, by most indications, this version was not penned, selected, and edited by either Tabart or Phillips, but rather by one of the Godwins, political activist, writer, and scholar William Godwin, 1756 to 1836, or his second wife, Mary Jane Godwin, 1766 to 1841. These days best known as the father and stepmother, respectively, of Mary Shelley, author of Frankenstein. Mary Shelley's own accomplishment and notoriously exciting life have tended to overshadow the accomplishments of her father and stepmother, and in particular their role in helping to establish two separate lines of children's books: the popular Tabart books, where the history of Jack and the Beanstalk first appeared, and their own juvenile library. For the most part, their goals tended to be purely monetary. Between them, the Godwins were responsible for 5 children, and they had their own expenses, but they also had a love of fairy tales and literature, which they wanted to spread. Fortunately for them and Tabart, or Phillips, their fairy tale publications just happened to correspond with rising interest in fairy tales, which was presumably behind the idea of publishing the history of Jack and the Beanstalk, in an illustrated text that the title page describes as suitable for juveniles and schools. The word history was given some weight by the decision to set the story in a very specific historic time, the reign of King Alfred, 1849 to 1899. Isn't that curious? One of Britain's more admired kings, though otherwise this story cannot be considered particularly historical, let alone faithful to the Anglo-Saxon period. Okay, they say. Unless there was a historical reset for some reason, which seems to be. This Jack is a greatly indulged child, and indulgent the author does not admire, to the point where he and his widowed mother are down to their last cow. Faced with the choice of selling the cow or starving, his weeping mother chooses to sell the cow, trusting the Jack to be able to do that at least. Jack instead trades the cow for some colorful beans, infuriating his mother, who kicks the beans around in a fury. Some land in the garden, and by morning Jack is shocked to see a giant beanstalk growing in the garden. Already a few shifts have entered the story. The cow, new to this version, rapidly becoming a staple of other versions, and Jack not sowing the beans himself. Also, this beanstalk has, helpfully enough, grown into the shape of a ladder, which makes it easier to climb. At the top of the beanstalk, Jack finds a desert and a fairy who informs him that his father was an extremely wealthy, benevolent man, murdered by a giant as he was trying to offer the giant a book. I know. Which all probably explains just why Jack was so indulged as a child. The fairy notes that she inspired Jack to trade the cow for the beans, and then, after very kindly giving him the near-perfect excuse for that major slip-up, quote, "Sure, Mom, we had nothing for dinner, but on the other hand, a fairy made me do it," unquote. She informs Jack that he is the person appointed to punish the giant for all of his wickedness. She then vanishes without offering him anything to eat, even though just a few pages ago he was dying of hunger and has nothing to eat since. For stories consumed with the thoughts of beans and food, people really don't get to eat all that much in the middle of them. In fact, the first person who offers Jack any real food is the giant's wife, who feeds him up right before showing him all of the various prisoners living in the giant's grand house, waiting to be eaten. She hides him in the oven, which does not quite seem like the safest hiding place. But moving on, just in time, since the giant is back and hungry and able to smell humans, though first he needs to get his golden egg from a hen. Jack watches, steals the hen, and hurries home. He and his mother sell off a few golden eggs, which does wonders for their finances. And then Jack decides to head up the beanstalk again. A footnote explains he's afraid the fairy will come after him if he doesn't. Disguising himself, he manages to sweet talk his way into the giant's home again and steal away with a bag of gold and a bag of silver. Interesting. Enough to keep him and his mother well off for 3 years. 3 years. Interesting. Oops. Oh. For some reason, nobody, including the giant, who you would think would be a bit concerned about this, has done anything about the beanstalk during this time, making it fairly easy for Jack to climb up the beanstalk again, this time carrying away the self-playing harp. The harp, kind of freaked out by all this, starts screaming, summoning the giant, who tears off after Jack, who has the sense to call for a hatchet, and the very good luck to have someone standing nearby who just happens to have a hatchet, like how many of us, when we really, really need it, hit someone or something with an axe? Have someone ready and willing to hand one over to us? Outside of hobbits traveling to Mordor, of course, and even then. Jack is one lucky dude, is what I'm saying. Jack slices through the beanstalk, knocking it down and killing the giant. We never do find out what happened to the castle, or for that matter, the other humans kept prisoner in the castle. Maybe the giant already ate them, nor do we find out exactly who just happened to be standing near the bottom of this beanstalk wielding a hatchet. Not Jack's mother, as the tale clarifies in lengthy explanatory footnotes. She was not in favor of this entire endeavor. Speaking of those lengthy explanatory footnotes, even though this version contains nearly every element of the most popular versions of the tale, the cow, the beans, the giant, the five-fold thumb, the singing harp, this was not the exact